So in terms of the licensing history of COATE, we picked the matter up next in 1983. We go to BAYP 602_196, please, Shomik. We can see here a product license being granted now to Miles Laboratories Limited, trading as Qatar Laboratories, division of Miles Laboratories Limited. So we've got there the interrelationships which I referred to yesterday afternoon. We can see the date of grant is the 16th of August 1983. If we go over the page, we can see the detail of the product. So it's a license for COATE. We haven't, I think, got the license application documentation, I'm afraid. But if we go to the third page, we can see the warning, just over halfway down the page. COATE concentrate is a purified dried fraction of pooled plasma obtained from many paid donors. The presence of hepatitis viruses should be assumed, and the hazard of administering COATE concentrate should be weighed against the medical consequence of withholding it, particularly in persons with few previous transfusions of blood or blood products. And I'll come back to the language of some of the warnings this afternoon. But that was the warning in relation to COATE as at the August 1983 licence grant. You'll note there no reference to AIDS at this stage. If we look at BAYP 5028_038, and we'll come back to this again later, or come back to these issues later today, but we can see that back in February of 1983, the manufacturer, Qatar Laboratories, is alert to the potential risk of AIDS because it's beginning to take measures in relation to screening donors on the basis of it. And we see from this announcement, Qatar Laboratories announces plasma donor screening program. First paragraph, third line. Today announced it will screen plasma donors by using a confidential questionnaire designed to eliminate those in high-risk groups for AIDS. And we can see the second paragraph records that initial investigations at CDC and other research centres around the country have indicated that AIDS might be transmissible through blood and certain blood plasma products. And then there's further details over the page. We'll look at it now so that we don't need necessarily to come back to it later. About the questionnaire, we can see it said in the second paragraph that all donors at Qatar-owned and affiliated plasma centres, and again, I'll be coming on to what we know about sources of plasma for Qatar later, will be asked to read and sign a confidential questionnaire which states they're not members of any of the 3 high-risk groups. In addition, the medical examination routinely given to all donors will be expanded to include questions specifically related to AIDS, like symptoms such as night sweats, drastic unexplained weight loss and recurrent fever. And then there's reference to, in the next paragraph, to an intention to initiate supplementary physical examinations of all donors. And Qatar, the next paragraph tells us, is committed to taking whatever precautionary measures the company can to protect the haemophiliacs who depend on our products for their lives. And then there's a reference to the development of heat treatment. So that's Qatar's position as manufacturer in February 1983. But as I say, the licence application then, or the licence granted to Miles Laboratories Limited in August of that year, contains only the warning that we've seen by reference to hepatitis viruses. Just sticking with 1983 for the moment, if we go to BAYP 5027_074, we can see a letter of the 29th of November 1983.
23rd?
Sorry, 23rd of November 1983, from a sales manager Mr. Barber, to Dr. Wensley, who we know of, obviously both in relation to the blood transfusion service in Manchester and the Manchester Haemophilia Centre. And we can see he is providing information further to a meeting that he'd held with Dr. Wensley about coate batches. He refers to the copy of a May edition of Echo magazine devoted entirely to AIDS, and he talks about it containing a complete list of all plasma donor centres. You'll note there's no centres in San Francisco or New York. Again, I'll come on to this later. But then we can see, it's just interesting to note, the different lots of coate being offered and the different prices. So the first group is manufactured from plasma all collected after the 1st of March 1983, and that's described as the effective date when Qatar introduced the new regulations for donor acceptance at the donor centre. And the price that's there recorded is 6.75 pence per international unit, and Mr. Barber says this is going to increase to 8 pence per international unit from the 1st of January. So that's the post-March plasma. The second group of lots manufactured from plasma collected before the 1st of March 1983, and we can see that's cheaper. So 6.35 pence per international unit. This price will remain firm to you, subject then to release by NIBSC, and told the product could be available in early February. And then there's a third lot. Sorry, just bottom of the first page first of all, Shomik. There's a third lot described at the bottom of the page, manufactured from plasma, so also manufactured from plasma collected before the 1st of March 1983. And the price of that is, if we look at the top of the next page, 5 pence per international unit. So cheaper prices being offered in relation to coate that is manufactured from plasma collected before the 1st of March 1983. Returning then to the licensing process, if we go to BAYP 603_230, we've got an application for a change to the licence. Again, we can see it's Miles Laboratories Limited because they're the current licence holder for coate. And then we've got the changes, which just simply reflects HBC antibody tests now included in the Qatar system. And the date of this is the 10th of May, 1984. I think, in fact, we don't have any further documentation in relation to that application. If we then move to later in 1984, BAYP 5025_093, this is a letter addressed to Bayer AG in Germany, 4th of December 1984. We start to see at this point in time the transition to heat-treated coate, and I'll come on to the licensing process in relation to coate HT. But we can see reference in the second paragraph to a coate HT trial, and then the author of the letter, Mr. Marzouk, says the situation has changed dramatically within the last few days. A haemophiliac has died from AIDS, and the death of this patient has developed into a big public and press campaign in favour of heat-treated material. Because of this, we are now selling coate HT, so that's a separate product for which there's a separate licensing process. It's apparent that all centres will be completely converted to heat-treated material without the need for a study. And then we can see discussion, as at late 1984, within Qatar/Miles of the switch to heat-treated products at BAYP 5025_087. So this is the 30th of November 1984. And we can see it says meetings were held with Qatar UK sales and marketing staff as well as with Miles UK support personnel to discuss results to date in 1984 and make strategic plans for 1985. So that's what this document relates to. If we go to the bottom of page 3 and we pick up the heading COAT HT, so the heat-treated product, AIDS has finally come to the United Kingdom with a force that has caused a virtual panic in the Department of Health. For 1 year, this department has blocked every application for registration of heat-treated factor VIII products. And now in the space of 1 week, they are in a panic responding to the newspaper demands for action concerning the AIDS risk to haemophiliacs. The action by the Department of Health comes after the announcement in the Sunday Mail that 2 haemophiliacs have died from AIDS. And then there's reference to a number of headlines. Following these headlines, the Department of Health has advised Qatar that every action will be taken to grant us registration by early December. As we indicated in our last trip report on this subject, Marie Tat is to make every effort to have them grant us a new registration, not a licence amendment. The haemophilia treatment centres are now also responding to the newspaper stimulus and requesting heat-treated COAT on a named patient basis. COAT UK had an inventory 1,000 vials of 500 IU COAT HT, which has now been allocated, and requests for other sizes have been received from the treatment centre. And then bottom of the page, the treatment centres are in some cases asking to return regular COAT, so the unheated product, after they've received COAT HT. These requests are being dealt with on an account-by-account basis, but we intend to accept all returns where we perceive an honest concern on the part of the transfusion centre. And then we can see the price of the heat-treated product at the top of the next page. We've established a selling price of 12 pence per unit on the COAT HT. If we turn then to BAYP 603_341, now this is another application for a change of product licence. So this is still the COAT, the original COAT product, with the licence number 0055/0065, held by Miles Laboratories Limited. It's not the heat-treated product. But if we see further down the page, we can see what's said to be the reasons for change. The process changes were made in order to produce a product suitable for heat treatment. And then over the page, we see the detail of that. So there's a change to the manufacturing process. The reason being it will enable production of the heat-treated product. And the date of this is the 7th of December, 1984. If we then go to BAYP 5024_047, we can see from an internal Miles/Qatar memo dated the 30th of January 1985, what we have is described as a key indicator report for December 1984. We needn't go through the details of the sales, but if we go to the bottom of the page, we can see a summary of the position as between the 2 COAT products, the licensed product, which is the unheated product, and then the heat-treated, which is currently being dealt with on a named patient basis and is unlicensed. COAT factor VIII concentrators successfully reached and exceeded the end-of-year budget by 4%. COAT HT was forced onto the UK marketplace by the market's demand for heat-treated factor VIII concentrate. Some COAT regular material was returned during December. However, the sale of COAT HT has compensated and exceeded the monthly budget. So that's a snapshot of the picture as at the end of December of 1984. As we'll see shortly, there's then a licensing application process for the heat-treated product. But just to complete the picture in relation to what happened to the product license, the unheated COAT, we can pick that up at BAYP 5011_090. This is a later document, a Bayer document from the 17th of May 1988, but it tells us that a reminder has been received from the DHSS that the product licence of COATE, and we have the product licence number there set out, expires on the 15th of August 1988, and a renewal application should therefore be submitted as soon as possible. However, I think I'm correct in saying that this form of COATE is no longer produced since it's been superseded by COATE HT. If you're in agreement, I'll inform the DHSS that the product licence holder, Miles, will allow the licence to lapse on expiry. And that's what happened. So effectively, a licence, COATE remained licensed until 1988, the unheated product, but was not, so the licence wasn't revoked, but it then lapsed in 1988, as we see here. So that completes the overview, sir, of the licensing position in relation to the unheated COATE material. If we can then just look a little more at the position in relation to COATE HT, the heat-treated product. If we turn, first of all, to BAYP 5027_078. This is a document relating to the position in the US from Qatar Laboratories to the Office of Biological Research and Review, November the 21st, 1983. We don't need to go through the detail of it because it is dealing with the US licensing process. But we can see that as at November 1983, Qatar was writing to the Office of Biologic Research, we need only look at the first paragraph, with a view to amending its product licence application to include the dry heat treatment step. We don't need to follow through what happened in terms of US licensing. In terms of the position then in relation to the heat-treated product in the UK, if we go to BAYP 5025_019, we can see a telex, the date of which is the 3rd of September 1984, and we can see the position in the UK as at September of 1984 is that there had been an application for under the CTX procedure in relation to a clinical trial of COATE HT, and this confirms that approval had been received from the Department of Health for the clinical trial to commence on which may commence on the 12th of September 1984. If we then just, and I'm slightly dotting between the UK and the US here, but if we go to CGRA 40447, again, this is a document, I think, sent by the president of, described as Qatar Biological in California, 26th of October 1984, to haemophilia treaters, to haemophilia clinicians in the States. I've just draw your attention to the last paragraph on this page, which explains that Qatar is immediately converting manufacture of all COATE to COATE HT. So that was the plan in terms of manufacture as at the end of October 1984. And then if we then move chronologically back to the UK to DHSC 0002251_015, we can then pick the matter up at the end of November 1984. This is a communication from Dr. Mary Duncan to the Supplies Division, which records that an abridged application has been received from Miles Laboratories to license dry heat-treated Factor VIII, COATE HT, and this will be handled as a matter of some urgency. It said that NIBSC has been informed and their expert advice has been sought. So we'd moved fairly quickly from the clinical trial process contemplated in September of 1984 to the abridged license application for a product license for heat-treated COATE by at the end of November 1984. In the meantime, if we look at BAYP 5025_081, we see, and this happens to be a letter from Sales Development Manager Linda Frith to Professor Bloom, 29th of November, but we can see that the heat-treated product was being offered for sale to haemophilia centres. And it was at that stage because it wasn't licensed on a named patient basis. That's apparent from various other documents as well. If we then look at CGRA 40554, we've got a document headed Qatar UK Year-End Review and Reports dated January 1985, and it gives us an overview of the position in relation to the introduction of heat-treated coate in 1984. So if we pick it up at page 5, second paragraph begins, Coate HT was launched into the UK market at the end of November 1984. And then if we turn to page 8, we can see a little more about the background circumstances in that first paragraph. It was anticipated that Coate HT would be launched into the UK market during the second quarter of 1985. Its appearance at the end of November 1984, replacing all non-treated material, was somewhat hasty, and we've seen the other documents which explain the circumstances of that. The fast response by Qatar UK and the availability of material ensured we retained all existing business and were able to supply additional sales where other commercial companies in the NHS were unable to supply heat-treated materials. There's then a reference to the overall market shares, and you'll see there Qatar's market share is described as being approximately 22%, with Armour's being 56%. This is during 1984. Alpha 17, Immuno 3, Travenol 2%. And then there's a description of the offer of heat-treated material by some of the other commercial companies in the next paragraphs. Bottom of the page just looks forward from Qatar's perspective to 1985. Qatar will remain one of the major suppliers in the UK for heat-treated factor concentrate. During 1985, it's planned to make Qatar a household name in the haemophilia field, promoting Coate HT's many significant advantages over the competition, improving and expanding our relationships with our users, and as you previously observed, sir, that's effectively a reference to those who are purchasing the product as clinicians or health authority officials. In person, by mailings and advertising literature, the US wall poster and Slim Jim information sheets, along with the home treatment therapy film, will be useful tools. Product license registration for Coate HT is expected during the first quarter of 1985, with product being supplied at present on a named patient basis. And then if we go to page 10, this will save coming back to this document when we look shortly at Co9. This is a reference here to Co9 HT, so the heat-treated Co9 product for the treatment of haemophilia B. Interest in Co9 HT has prompted a product license submission to the DHSS, with present supply again being maintained on a named patient basis. Adequate supply of Factor 9 for the UK market had previously been supplied by Elstree, but heat-treated Factor 9 is not expected to be available from this source until late 1985 or early 1986. If we then go to CGRA 40559, this again is an internal Qatar or document, Qatar or Miles document. If we go to the second page, we can again just pick up the picture during the bottom half of the page about the switch over from Coate to Coate HT. So under the heading Coate returned material, the document reports that the December figures show returned Coate from only 2 centres, but the following centres have subsequently returned or are in the process of returning material, and a list of haemophilia centres are there set out. And then it's recorded that all the centres which returned Co8 in December and those subsequently have replaced with Co8 HT. And then if we go to the next page, under the heading, the current factor VIII market environment, Co8 heat-treated material, we see the observations from the Qatar perspective about a number of haemophilia centres and their response. So the intention of the UK was to launch Co8 HT into the market in the second quarter of 1985 with an organised entry ensuring product availability and a product licence. However, on several occasions during November 84, the national papers flooded the media with shock announcements of the deaths and the contraction of AIDS through blood donations and the subsequent fractions of factor VIII concentrate. Stories included, and then we see a number of accounts there set out, and we've seen reference, I think, to all of these in the evidence that inquiries previously heard. So deaths in Australia, the death of a haemophiliac from AIDS who was a patient at Newcastle, a Bournemouth donor donating blood and then having been diagnosed as an AIDS victim, and then the position in relation to Scotland. The response of the haemophilia centres covered the entire spectrum from panic to no action. The Wessex Regional Centre at Alton changed overnight from regular material to Armour heat-treated material. Newcastle's transition was slower, but a definite replacement of regular stock to heat-treated has occurred. No non-heat-treated material is now being used. Oxford, on the other hand, waited for a formal discussion between the haemophilia directors before switching to heat-treated material. Other centres like St George's, Birmingham, the Hammersmith and the London are still using non-heat treatment material. The material may be commercial or NHS product. And then over the page, there's a discussion of Qatar Laboratories' role. We had the good fortune of 1,000 vials of Co8 HT, 500 international units, nominal potency in our inventory, and the almost immediate availability and supply of other potencies from the US. This gave us, as we were to find out, a clear selling advantage over all our competitors. And then objectives and tactics are then set out. Objectives to retain all of Qatar's existing Co8 accounts by direct replacement with Co8 HT, to increase Qatar's market share by whatever amount possible given the situation and stocks available to us. And then a number of tactics there set out. Informal Co8 users of availability of Co8 HT. Informal Co8 users, we would be happy for them to return any Co8 stock and credit their account. Inform all other factor VIII concentrate users of the availability of Co8 HT. Organise sufficient stocks from the US to supply all current market needs. Continual reappraisal of the situation, stocks, customers and competitor activity. And then if we go to the bottom of the bottom of the next page, we can see the licensing position is set out under the heading Co8 HT licence. A submission has been made to the DHSS for the registration of Co8 HT. It's believed the licence will be granted at a meeting on the 26th of January. It will take possibly 6 weeks before paperwork is completed. A Co9 HT, a licence for Co9 HT has also been submitted. So just pausing there, we see from this series of internal documents a perspective we haven't perhaps seen before, the perspective of the pharmaceutical company in the UK as to its analysis of what happened in the latter part of 1984 in terms of what's described as this sudden response to media reports and a sudden demand for heat-treated material by some haemophilia centres, if not all, and then the impact that then had on the licensing process, leading to the licensing process being compressed and a license application being submitted rather earlier than had otherwise been anticipated. But before we leave this document, we should just look perhaps at paragraph 8. Sorry, page 8. I'm sorry, Shomik, page 8. Which is a report of various meetings between Qatar representatives and haemophilia clinicians and other haemophilia staff. And again, it's perhaps just instructive in terms of what it reveals about relationships. So we've got second paragraph, Professor Bloom was contacted. He assured me that they will stay with Qatar. He also informed me that they're switching completely to Co-8 HT from that day, 4th of December. There's then, next paragraph talks about a meeting with the haemophilia staff at Lincoln, the Lincoln Haemophilia Centre. Co-8 HT was discussed, however, no decisions have yet been made, and there's a reference to a visit from the immunorep. Dr. Mitchell Darby, a meeting, her decision to change to heat-treated material for their next order. There's then, we can skip over the next paragraph because that deals with the blood bags that were sold by Qatar rather than Co-8. And then there's a reference to a meeting at which it was learned that Sheffield, Nottingham and Leicester have decided to use heat-treated material only on newly diagnosed severe haemophiliacs. Leeds region has made the decision to use only heat-treated material. From the commercial companies, the likelihood of Qatar obtaining business in the region is fair. At the moment, however, they have somewhere in the region of 3 months' supply of NHS material. And then this, by far the most important happening this month, is a very successful meeting with Dr. Wensley, Manchester, when he promised me all of his business for the next contract. This is the period between January and April 1985, depending on finances being available. And then, skipping over a line, Dr. Wensley was promised a £10,000 sponsorship programme for research to be carried out over 2 years. In financial terms, this contract will mean the sale of approximately 2.5 million international units of Co-8 HT during 1985. So interesting to see the range of interactions that were taking place between the pharmaceutical rep and the various treatment centres in that critical month of December 1984. If we then go to BAYP 5024_034, we can pick up the picture in relation to the licensing authority's consideration of the product licence application for Co-8 HT. So this is dated the 17th of January 1985. Co-8 HT product licence, informal telephone call received from Dr. Duncan. Product licence will be issued on receipt of written confirmation from us that we will include a statement in datasheet that product is heated at 68 degrees centigrade for 72 hours, and this is done to reduce risk of infectivity. No need to mention that dry heat is used. Please confirm that this is acceptable to Qatar. And then the response is at BAYP 603_301. Third, 23rd of January 1985 to Dr. Duncan at the DHSS, confirming that the datasheet for Co-8 HT will include that statement about heat treatment and that the step has been introduced in order to reduce the risk of transmission of infectious agents. And then we can see the product licence being granted in relation to Co-8 HT at BAYP 603_309. So it's granted as a product licence 0055/0107 to Miles Laboratories Limited, trading as Qatar's Laboratories, division of Miles Laboratories Limited. The date is the 18th of February 1985. We see that at the bottom of the page. If we go over the page, we can see that the product is the Co-8 HT product. Then if we go to the next page, we pick up the heading warnings towards the bottom of the page. So there's reference to allergic reactions, including chills, fever, and hypersensitivity reactions. Then there's an issue pertinent to certain blood groups. And then if we go over the page, so nothing else by way of warnings of relevance for present purposes. And then over the page, we've got, under the heading Contraindications, Precautions, and Warnings, Co-8 HT concentrate is a purified, dried fraction of pooled plasma obtained from mini donors. The presence of hepatitis viruses should be assumed, The hazard of administering Co-8HT should be weighed against the medical consequences of withholding it, particularly in persons who've had few previous transfusions of blood or blood products. So again, the reference is to hepatitis viruses, no reference there in relation to HTLV3 or AIDS. But in any event, that is the licence being granted for the heat-treated product on a, as it were, an expedited basis in February of 1985. Don't think we need to look at that. And so if we then go to BAYP 608_069, we can see an application for a change to the licence. The date of the application is the 30th of May 1985. We see that from the bottom of the page. The top of the page tells us that it's an application in relation to the licence for Co-8HT. And then we see on the screen what the change is. The proposed additional words relate to including testing of samples from all donors for antibodies to HTLV3. And then the reason that's given for that is that the procedure for screening of donors has been updated in accordance with FDA requirements. And that was, as far as we understand the position to be, that change was approved. If we just then look at BAYP 609_030, this takes us forward now to October 1986, and this is information that's being given by Qatar through its sales team to haemophilia clinicians in relation to the Co-8HT product. This particular letter is being sent to Dr. Prentice at Plymouth, Dr. Lee, who is the Haemophilia Centre Director at Exeter, Dr. Smith and Mr. Gardner at Bath. And we can see that there's been some form of meeting, because Mrs. Frith writes, it was a pleasure to speak with you last week about Co-8HT. I've tried to answer your questions about the product as follows. And then we can see the provision of some information as at October 86 about the product. Co-8HT is prepared from pooled human plasma from at least 1,000 healthy donors. So we have that phraseology, at least 1,000 again. All donors are required to read and sign a confidential questionnaire, which states that they're not members of any of the high-risk groups for AIDS, and then reference to the medical examination. No plasma collected from the metropolitan areas of New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, or Miami. So that's plasma source, that's what's being said. Screening of plasma. Prior to pooling, each individual unit of plasma is tested and found non-reactive for hepatitis B surface antigen and antibodies to HTLV3. So we've got the long-standing hepatitis B testing, the more recently introduced screening in relation to HTLV3. And then we're told that Qatar Laboratories is also screening individual donations for ALT levels. And then that paragraph concludes, by the end of this year, all batches of Co-8HT will have been prepared and plasma screened for ALT levels, in addition to HTLV3 antibodies and hepatitis B surface antigen. And then details are given about the heat treatment process. And over the page, under the heading Virus Inactivation Studies HIV, there's reference, I don't need to go through the details of it, to what's said to be a range of studies reporting the success of the heat treatment process in eliminating HTLV3. And then if we just look towards the bottom of the page, the paragraph above the heading Product Integrity deals with non-A, non-B hepatitis. So further evidence of absence of non-A, non-B hepatitis and HTLV3 infectivity is obtained from clinical use of the product. And then it said that since it was first marketed in the USA in February 84 and in the UK since February 85, no reports of hepatitis non-A, non-B or HTLV3 antibody seroconversion in patients treated with co-8-HT have been received from these or other markets worldwide. So that's the information that's being provided to, it would appear, a number of clinicians who've sought specific answers to or sought further information about the safety of the product. And then if we go to the next page, we can just see in terms of the marketing of and sales of the product, last two paragraphs, Mrs. Frith is saying that they can deliver co-8-HT and all Qatar products the next day on receipt of a phoned order, an emergency same-day courier service, and we can provide free home treatment packs and carrier bags if required. But just then move forward in relation to co-8-HT to 1988, and I'm hoping this is the right reference, Shumik, BAYP 5015_101. This is, can we go to the next page? That's fine, I've got the document in a slightly different format, but this is what we need. July the 1st, visit to Bayer UK. So it's an account from someone from, I think, Qatar in the US to a visit to Bayer UK, dealing with a number of matters, most of which I don't need to trouble you with. But if we go to, it's probably page 5, Shomik. We can see bottom of the page, there's an issue there where it says we returned Dr. Thomas's call about hepatitis reports with a particular lot of co-8-HT. It said that all records have been reviewed, every unit tested and negative for HBsAg, as was the plasma pool. He asked whether we could rule out human error. Of course we could not. And then there's a further discussion in relation to this issue in relation to hepatitis B. I'm not going to go through all of it. If we go to the next page, we can see there's then a discussion in the second paragraph about whether the product will be taken off the market. The response is no, because there are patients to whom this product represents no additional risk. And then it said that the particular lot will be withdrawn, and it will be called a withdrawal rather than a recall, and that the lot would probably be destroyed. And then there's a request for samples. And then we can see it says Dr. Thomas called back later to say he's releasing the lot of co-8-HT being held up. And for future lots, he wants a sample of the plasma pool. Now, we'll be coming back, I think, at a later stage of hearings to look in more detail about what the processes were at NIBSC in terms of both batch release, stop orders, recall, and so on. But we can just see there an example of interactions between Qatar and Dr. Thomas at the National Institute, looking at issues relating to hepatitis in particular lots. And then if we go to BAYP 605_143, we're now in November of 1989, and we can see, just to complete the licensing picture, this is an application to renew the product license for the heat-treated co-8 product due to expire on the 17th of February 1990. You'll recall it had been granted in February 1985. And there's an application to renew the license. If we just go to page 4, we can see there, again, the terminology that's used. The source material is pooled plasma obtained from at least 1,000 healthy donors. So that same term that we saw back from 1976, at least 1,000, is used. It's collected by plasmapheresis at centres in the USA, licensed by the FDA, inspected by both the FDA and Qatar Laboratories. Plasma is collected according to the Qatar system of plasmapheresis, which incorporates all the current FDA requirements for source plasma, including testing for hepatitis B surface antigen and antibodies for HIV. In addition, Qatar test samples from all new donors for antibody to hepatitis B core antigen. So that's the basic information in terms of the screening and testing of the donations.
It doesn't say anything there about ALT tests.
It doesn't, no.
Despite that being part of the license.
Yes, you're right, it doesn't. Whether there's a reason for that, sir, I don't currently know, but we can ascertain that. And then BAYP 5033_012. This is a memorandum 25th of February 1992, and it's just an update about the current status of Qatar products in the UK. We go to the bottom of the page, it deals with the Factor 8 products. It says, we currently hold a product license for the dry heat treated product, Co8HT. This was withdrawn from the market a couple of years ago for two reasons, namely the availability of safer products and the fact that it is no longer manufactured by Qatar. The license will be allowed to lapse. So that was the end of the licensing history in relation to the heat-treated Co8, or the product, sorry, Co8HT. Owing to inadequate resources from Qatar, the additional work required to register the next generation wet heat-treated product, Co8HS, was not performed, and our license application was withdrawn. Top of the next page. All effort has since been put into Qatar's current product, Co8HP, a solvent detergent treated product, although it's then said that there are no current plans to market this in the UK. So there is quite a lot of material relating to the licensing application process in relation to Co8HS. I'm not going to spend any time on that today because there are quite a lot of documents relating to other aspects of Co8, particularly in the 70s and the early 1980s, that I want to concentrate on. But at some point, perhaps when we come back to evidence relating to licensing from the perspective of looking at what was actually done by the licensing authority, we might want to come back to it because it may be thought that the approach taken by the licensing authority in the second half of the 1980s was more rigorous than the approach taken at an earlier stage. And the way in which, for example, the application for Co8HS was dealt with might provide some form of a mini case study in relation to that. So I'm not going to deal with it today, but there is an issue for potential exploration about whether it shows a more robust approach on the part of the licensing authority by the second half of the 80s. I'm going to turn therefore to briefly to Co9. If we start with BAYP 604_285. We can see top of the page Co9 Factor 9 complex. The license holder is Qatar Laboratories, and the date of the application, bottom of the page, is the 3rd of July 1980. We don't, I'm afraid, have either a complete set of documents in relation to the licensing application for Co9 or a complete set of documents which tells us what happened to the licence. So at the moment I can tell you based upon this that an application was made in July of 1980. If we go to BAYP 608_071, there's a little bit of a background here. I'm not sure what the authorship of this document is, but in any event, it purports to set out a potted history, as it were, in relation to Co9. As early as 1968, Qatar Biological introduced Co9, a preparation of factor IX complex, onto the market in the USA and in many other countries around the world. An application for a UK product licence for Co9 was submitted by Qatar in 1982. So we've seen an application from 1980. But as the format was not in compliance with the DHSS guidelines, the application was unacceptable and subsequently withdrawn. For commercial reasons, a resubmission of the data in the correct format was not pursued. Just pausing there, we do see some evidence of potentially of Co9 being used on a named patient basis. But we know from other material that most haemophilia centres had NHS factor IX available to them. So that may be why it refers to commercial reasons, I don't know. And then it said in 1984, following intensive work on methods designed to reduce the risk of transmission of potential infectious viruses in their coagulation products, Qatar completed the development of a heat-treated preparation of Co9, Co9HT. As the clinical use of Co9 was by then well established worldwide and the heat-treated product had been shown to be equivalent in terms of in vivo biological activity and half-life to the non-heated product, no additional clinical trials were conducted with Co9HT. It then refers to the heat treatment process for Co9HT being the same as that for Co8HT, for which there was a licence. If we then go down to a couple of further paragraphs, to the paragraph beginning on the 8th of May 1985, Miles Laboratories submitted an application for a product licence for heat-treated factor IX complex Co9HT, manufactured by Qatar Biological Division of Miles Laboratories Inc. USA. So we can see then, and this is really a convenient shorthand rather than going to all the underlying documents, we see that an application for a product licence for Co9HT was submitted in the course of 85. And then we're told that in October 1985, the company received a Section 21 letter from the Committee on the Safety of Medicines informing them that on grounds relating to safety, quality and efficacy, they might be unable to recommend the grant of a product licence. And we can see that it appears that the Committee on the Safety of Medicines had a number of concerns about the provision of inadequate evidence or information. If we go over to the top of the next page, it said inadequate evidence had been provided of virus inactivation. So that was one of the concerns. And then we can see, in fact, the origin of this document below paragraph 5. This representation is Miles's response to the points raised by the committee and includes additional information relevant to the grounds referred to above. The committee is asked to consider these documents in the knowledge that Miles Laboratory has requested a hearing. And then I don't think I need to go through the detail of it, but there's various pieces of information then provided in support of Miles's application for a product licence for the Co9HT. If we go to page 7, we can see that this addresses, and we can see it from the heading, the suggestion that had emanated from the Committee on the Safety of Medicines that insufficient evidence had been provided of the clinical safety and efficacy of the product. And then there's a description, amongst other things, of matters relating to transmission of viral hepatitis. If we pick it up 3 paragraphs from the bottom, we can see it said that the transmission of viral hepatitis has always been of concern in clinical use of anti-haemophilic factor 8 or 9. The evidence to date suggests that the heating process employed in the production of Co9HT reduces this risk. There's then reference to a study in chimpanzees. And then if we go over the page, top paragraph refers to there being no evidence of non-A, non-B hepatitis or hepatitis B observed in animals administered with heated Co9. And then it says clinical studies designed to investigate the possibility of transmission of non-A, non-B hepatitis have to be performed in patients who've not previously received blood products, that is virgin haemophiliacs with haemophilia B. Quite apart from the ethics of conducting trials in these patients, the number of available patients is very small. Qatar is currently monitoring the use of Co9HT in such patients, but so far only 2 patients have become available for inclusion in the study, and the study is not yet complete. Although as yet we've no absolute evidence that heat-treated Co9 does not transmit non-A non-B hepatitis in haemophiliacs, we've had no reports of non-A non-B hepatitis in haemophiliacs receiving our dry heat-treated factor 8 preparation, which has been in clinical use for several years. And then the conclusion on that final paragraph, although all possible steps have been and are being taken by Qatar to reduce the risk of transmission of infectious viruses, the technology presently available does not allow us to claim with certainty that the product is completely free of infectious virus. The risk to the patient must be considered carefully in each individual case and balanced against the risk of depriving the patient of treatment with the product. So that's part of the information that we can see being submitted in response to the provisional conclusions of the Committee on the Safety of Medicine, that there was insufficient evidence to reassure them. I don't think we have a specific date for that document. But we do know from other documents, which I don't need to take you to, that Co9HT was being supplied on a named patient basis to a limited extent at least. I don't think we know the full extent of it. And then we can see BAYP. Sorry, I'm going to take you to a different document. BAYP 604_326. We can see here, this is some of the underlying documents to which that background summary referred. So this is October 1985. This is a communication from the Committee on the Safety of Medicines to Miles Laboratories in relation to the Co9HT product. And we can see here set out the provisional conclusions of the committee to which that other document was responding, including at 4, inadequate evidence provided of virus inactivation, insufficient, and then at 5, insufficient evidence provided of the clinical safety and efficacy of the product or of the product on which it's based. And again, it may be that looking at how the Committee on the Safety of Medicines dealt in the mid and latter part of the 1980s with applications such as this may provide a degree of contrast with the approach taken by the Licensing Authority or Committee on the Safety of Medicines in the 1970s and in the early part of the 1980s. There are a range of communications then between the Licensing Authority and Miles Laboratories. I don't think we need to look at them in any great detail, but if we just pick up the picture at BAYP 607_161, we perhaps get some insight into the approach of the Licensing Authority. So this document's dated the 2nd of December 1985, and it's a note of a meeting held at NIBSC on the 28th of November 1985 to discuss the Committee on the Safety of Medicine's decision on Co9HT. We can see it's also there's a discussion about Gamimune. If we look at just the second paragraph, GS said, and that I think is someone from NIBSC, they were tightening up on blood products and required more detailed information concerning screening of donors for HTLV3, et cetera, towards the end of that paragraph, wish to see results of viral inactivation studies. And bottom of the page, we can see they also want to know about elimination of viruses during purification. So again, there's an insight there perhaps into a more robust approach being taken from a licensing perspective. If we move then on to a document in 1987, BAYP 5010_170. This is dated the 29th of September 1987. It's an internal Miles and Qatar document headed Co9HT Expert Report. It explains as follows: our Co9HT PLA, so product license application, was submitted 2 years ago, but the CSM required further information on safety and efficacy before recommending the grant of a product license. After discussion with the licensing authority, it was agreed that we would have to provide some long-term evidence of safety in clinical use, with special reference to the transmission of infectious viruses. And then next paragraph, after further discussion with the licensing authority on the problems of generating the safety data, we decided to approach a haemophilia centre director in the UK to obtain support for our submission to the CSM. Unfortunately, we've not yet been able to find anyone willing to do this, although Professor Templey, who was an Irish, based in Dublin, I think, had indicated to me that he would be prepared to assist us. The CSM is now pressing us for a response to their request. We still wish to register Co9HT in the UK. I feel we should be able to provide a satisfactory response to the CSM with or without the support of a UK clinician. At least we could make a stab at it. And then I'm not going to go through the full picture, but I don't think we have all the documents. I think it's 1988. I'll check and confirm if I've got that wrong after lunch, but the license application for Co9HT was withdrawn, and so it didn't proceed to the grant of a license. So that's the picture in relation to licensing for the factor concentrate products. I just then want to turn to a handful of internal documents from Qatar which show changing market shares and product usage in the early part of the 1980s. So if we start with BAYP 5021_016, this is a document described as 1981 Co8 marketing notes. If we turn to page 3, there's a market overview. The first paragraph refers to strict control of health services finances. If we go to the bottom of the page, we can see it said that at present none of the 3 leading suppliers appears to have a dominant image with haemophilia centre staff. Qatar has an opportunity to become the market leader and company identifiable with the treatment of haemophilia. There's then, if we go to page 5, identification of key reference centres and allied major users. And then if we go over the page, we can see at the bottom half of the page what's said to be the estimated current market. It's not quite clear what that's based on. Again, we see Armour, although not by a huge margin, being identified as the having the largest share of the market, and Qatar's as being relatively modest in comparison, 7.5%. We then see a list on the next page of existing contracts with competitors. I don't need to go through the detail there, but you'll see a list of who's got contracts with Travenol, Armour and Immuno. And then if we go to page 9, we can see Qatar's marketing objectives in 1981, which include establishing Qatar as a major supplier with a good definable market image, whatever precisely that means. And then over the page, we can see there what's going to be the focus. It would appear from a marketing perspective: penetration of major accounts. 9 major accounts/buying groups have been selected where the objectives are to gauge major volume sales, and we can see them, the number of leading reference centres there set out. And then we're told that Oxford have been buying Co8 until recent product problems appeared. Thank you. The next paragraph deals with tenders for the Royal Free, to be issued in January 1981, and then expectations of an order from Cardiff and Leeds, and efforts being made to repair previous damage done to business relations at Alton, so that's Trelaws. And then if we go to page 13, we can see what's said to be supporting activities. So these are some of the ancillary services or facilities being offered, it would appear, by Qatar. So education programme, booklets, leaflets, posters, magazines and the like, service programme, which includes home care packs, for example, and then meetings, hospital meetings, Haemophilia Society meetings, national and international meetings, Haemophilia Nurses Association. So that an insight into the marketing strategy of Qatar in relation to Kuwait in 1981. I'm not going to go through all of the documents, but we can just then see to some extent whether those objectives were realised in the following years. BAYP 5019_073. This is a 1982 marketing plan. If we go to the third page, it's said that 1981's proved to be a difficult year for Qatar Laboratories, largely due to factors outside our control, and 1.3 refers to Kuwait quality problems, coupled with adverse publicity concerning quality problems with Humanate, the pirate Kuwait product sold by Spaywood Laboratories. Again, we'll come back to that tomorrow. Continuing difficulties in obtaining sufficient Kuwait and required potencies. But it's then said, nevertheless, we feel we've established the company very firmly in the eyes of both customers and competitors, and we're now well placed to achieve our ambitious plan for 1982. And then if we go to page 18, under the heading Market Information, there's then a table of estimated total usage of concentrate as at July 1981, with the estimated shares being there set out. So Armour significantly increased, 41%, and Qatar there at 13.2%, and we can see the figures for the other companies as well. So that's 1982. 1983 CGRA. So that's the 1982 plan looking at the situation in 1981. If we go to CGRA 40586, this is described as a 1983 preliminary marketing plan. If we go to page 3, we can see the overview. 1982 is described as having been a year of major difficulties in all product areas. The major difficulties have been, and then point 2 is a 20% fall in prices for factor 8 concentrate. And then below that it said that our successes in 1982 have been to firmly establish Kuwait in the factor 8 market. Towards the bottom of the page, the perspective is offered that a national health service continues to be underfunded. We can see no fundamental changes in purchasing philosophy in 1983. Price is likely to remain the most dominant influencing factor in our market areas. And then if we just go to page 9, under the heading Market Information, this perspective is offered. The market's extremely competitive. Prices have fallen by 20% over the last 12 months. And then if we go to the next paragraph, 50% of the commercial market is contracted on an annual basis, with most contracts being awarded during the first few months of the UK financial year. Our share of this market sector is 20%. The market continues to demand cheap factor 8, with little consideration given to purity, etc. Nevertheless, we've continued to emphasise the quality of Kuwait compared with competitive products. This has gained a substantial new business in 2 major accounts, Cardiff and Liverpool. bottom of the page, in some major centres, e.g. Alton, St Thomas's and Belfast, a major reason for not obtaining business has been ongoing trials with Autoplex and FIBA. Our failure to gain a share of the North West Thames regional contract was due to a combination of price and doubt concerning our labelled potencies. Next page, second paragraph. Low prices have been the major difficulty in the last 12 months. The average selling price in large centres is now below 5.5 pence. And then we can see a table with the market shares set out. Again, we see the figure in relation to Armour, although that's estimated to have dropped between 1981 and 1982, and Qatar's market share to have increased from 13% to 20% from 1981 to 1982. I'm not going to go to it, but the following 2 pages set out in some further detail some of the particular centres or regions that were going to be targeted by Qatar. And then, if we turn to BAYP 5028_071, if we go to page 7, we can see a description of the position in 1983. Under the heading Co-8, it said that 1983 opened quietly for Co-8, due partly to good supplies of NHS product to the centres. However, a good part of the sales shortfall is being clawed back in March due to good sales to a major new centre, Alton. Encouragingly, prices are now hardening fairly rapidly and have risen back up the 6 pence mark. And then if we go on the further 2 pages, please show me to page 9. Again, it's said that the market's fairly quiet. It's anticipated that 1983 will be a good year for Co-8. And I'm not going to go through the detail of that, but the anticipation in that final paragraph is these developments should enable us both to gain market share and to command higher prices for Co-8 in 1983. And then the last document I think that we need to look at in this category of documents is at BAYP 5028_134. This is an internal memorandum described as a key indicator report. It's dated the 11th of July 1983, and it's in respect of June 1983. We can see bottom of the page, under the heading Co-8, there's a paragraph at the end that says this result was the second best ever with unit sales and the best ever with sales revenue. Good sales to all major accounts, including a very large order to the Royal Free Hospital, achieved this result. And then if we go to the 3rd page, record sales of Co-8 demonstrate that no changes in treatment levels because of AIDS have occurred in the UK. Information required by the DHSS concerning checks on plasma collection, etc., was supplied with the assistance of Qatar International. And that second sentence, Sarah, I think is a reference to the steps we know were taken by the Department of Health in around June of 1983 to find out what, if anything, was being done in relation to the FDA recommendations and products made from plasma collected before March of 1983. So we do have other such documents from Qatar, but I don't want to go through all of them. That gives, I hope, a flavour of the position in relation to the first part of the 1980s. What I'm going to do after lunch then is turn to a range of documents which look at issues of plasma supply, so where Qatar Laboratories in the States was getting its plasma from, collection from prisons, pool sizes, and various documents relating to issues about donor screening in the 70s and 1980s.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll take a break then till 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock.